So this looks like a person who is kind of bathed in light and just kind of hovering.
Jonathan, what the heck is that, dude?
So this is coming from Sequoia
It
Park.
almost looks like a person, right?
Coming from Sequoia Park in California. And so when you watch this video, all we see is just what looks like a person who's just floating in air, but clothed in light. Again, what are we to make of all of this? Well, I can tell you that culture is almost, I would say, in need, almost hungry for this kind of supernatural being. Welcome to the Father Leo Show, where I'm dishing out faith, culture, and commentary. And in this episode, we're going to talk a little bit more about the new document from the Vatican that talks about the procedures and discerning very alleged supernatural phenomena, because there's a lot of supernatural things that's being reported these days. So let's just jump right into it. But before we do, I want to encourage you, if you haven't done so, please like, subscribe, share, and comment. All of this helps us to promote our show and get past the algorithms that suppresses Catholic teaching, because somehow social media, the internet, doesn't like it when a good message that is pastoral and informative as well as formational. In other words, we're not here just to make you mad, but the show really wants to give Catholics information to live their life in a faithful way amidst the craziness of all that everyone is seeing with these alleged supernatural phenomena. As well as, please make sure you consider supporting us on our Patreon community, because we're going to actually be moving towards a new model and making our commentary available only for those who truly are supporting the show as Patreon members. But at the same time, it gives you access to some great content and some pretty fantastic perks, including some upcoming travel as well as events in our new restaurant space called the Gastro Social. But we'll talk more about that a little bit later. Let's just jump right into it with my comments about faith and the supernatural world according to the Vatican. On May 17th, 2024, a new document that was signed by the Cardinal prefect Victor Manuel Fernandez of the CDF, which is the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, provided some new norms, which is kind of like the procedures in discerning alleged supernatural phenomena. And why is this important? Well, because of stuff like this.
You say it's a 90-year cover-up.
Just about, yeah.
90 years.
1933 was the first recovery in Europe, in Magenta, Italy. Italian government moved it to a secure air base in Italy for the rest of kind of the fascist regime until 1944, 1945. And, the Pope Pius XII back-channeled that.
So the Vatican was involved.
Yeah, and told the Americans what the Italians had, and we ended up scooping it.
Impetus for the congressional hearing. Ross, thanks for being with us as always. First of all, what do you make of the fact that that Susie's been trying to get a comment from the Vatican, and seems like they're just flat out not going to comment?
It's a very difficult situation. Firstly, good evening, Brian, of course, but I'd say it's a very difficult situation for the Vatican, because if Mr. Grush is telling the truth, and I'm told he is, it's a difficult thing for the Vatican to admit without the US concurring. Just to respond to one question you were raising earlier, I'm told the Vatican does have a very efficient intelligence service, and it's long collaborated with intelligence services like the CIA, providing useful intelligence, and especially in the wake of the Second World War, there was a great collaboration between the Vatican and the CIA's anti-communist efforts in Italy.
Okay. Very interesting stuff. So the allegation is that the Catholic Church is in on a cover-up about some UFOs, now known as UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. But in this case, these are unidentified flying objects that hit Magenta, Italy, and somehow the Vatican is in charge of all of that information. And so the allegation again is that the Catholic Church knows this stuff and is not releasing it to the people. And then we get this new document comes out and social media is just a buzz. So check out what social media is saying about the Vatican.
Should the Vatican have included the term interdimensional beings in its recent guidance update regarding the supernatural phenomena and other apparitions? Many think they should have. Some individuals have also suggested a less earthly reason for the Vatican's guidance update, saying that the rise in information and interest in UFO and UAP topic in recent years might be part of the reason. As described, an apparition refers to the appearance of a spiritual or supernatural visitor, most likely with instances involving a divine entity. With so much talk of interdimensional beings associated with UFOs and UAPs lately, it seems like it may coincide with what the Vatican is talking about. Could this video footage captured by a security camera explain why the Vatican is updating its new guidance in handling apparitions and other supernatural phenomena? Could this be an example of an interdimensional being exiting a craft of some sort? What do you think?
Well, I think that this is interesting. And you know what? If this kind of catches your imagination and your interest, well, good. Because the reality is the Catholic Church has always believed that we're not the only created beings in the universe. We know that. And so what I want to do is jump right into a better review of what the document actually says. Because unfortunately, I think there's a lot of times when you'll hear social media just go crazy with this kind of information, and no one's actually talking about what the document says. So let me actually jump right into it a little bit and kind of bring you to the conclusion. Before we get to the conclusion, however, we know that this was presented in several different languages, and in the past, what used to happen was the local bishop would do an investigation and study it and proclaim that it was either one of three categories, and those categories originally were that there's something supernatural happening, or that there is definitely nothing supernatural happening, or another declaration is there just needs to be more study, so no decision is being made. In other words, basically the local bishop would be punting this decision until more information is understood. And now we see that there is more to it. So the Vatican doesn't want to take a more, what we call sensational reaction. And so, in other words, they would just say that God has always been active in history, that the Holy Spirit is real, the Holy Spirit has used these supernatural experiences to enrich the life of faith and to get people to grow more spiritually, to be more devoted, to be more fraternal, to be more loving and serving. So when you see young people or people who have had supernatural experiences and it changes their life for the better, that's only a good thing. But they talk about now the reason for the new norms, because the original norms were published in 1978. And so these norms were established by the congregation in order to determine how to make decisions on these things. Is it true? Is it not true? What's going on? And so they discovered that in 1978, there's been kind of like a limited amount of knowledge that people had about supernatural things simply because the internet wasn't available to just about everyone. But now with the internet, especially with apps like TikTok, which, by the way, I am not in support of banning, because TikTok has been a real blessing. There's also been a lot of problems with it, but at least there's not the censorship that's happening versus with mainstream media. And as a result, you have this document from the Vatican that now helps to further explain what the guidelines are. And so the first thing is to talk about the nature of discernment and what it really means, and why do we need to really investigate this? Well, because obviously people are talking about it, so that there are some new aspects that's making the Vatican realize that if the church doesn't take action and investigates this and helps people to understand it, then people can literally go crazy. I mean, literally become insane with all of the new information that's coming out. I mean, if you see something like that, looks like an alien creature coming out of some sort of cloud and dancing around bathed in light, what are we to make of it? And so it's recognizing again that the Holy Spirit is real, that the dicastery has to take some action in all of this, and that the guidelines require that there be some sort of study. But the conclusions are now unique. And so let me kind of review what the conclusions are. One is called nihil obstat, which basically means nothing is an obstacle. That is basically not an approval, but it's basically saying that there is, without expressing any certainty, let me just give you the exact definition, without expressing any certainty about supernatural authenticity of the phenomena itself, many signs of the action of the Holy Spirit are acknowledged in the midst of the given spiritual experience, and no aspects that are particularly critical or risky have been detected, at least so far. For this reason, the diocesan bishop is encouraged to appreciate the pastoral value of the spiritual proposal and even to promote its spread, including possibly through pilgrimages to a sacred site. So there's nothing that stands in the way. And by the way, one of the big changes is that the local bishop no longer has the authority to provide this nihil obstat. It's up to the church and the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith that tells the bishop what he can do with regards to the supernatural thing. And so one instance is nothing is standing in the way. It's a good thing to, in fact, promote this. The second is the pre oculis abeator, that is. And it says, although important positive signs are recognized, some aspects of confusion or potential risks are also perceived that require a diocesan bishop to engage in careful discernment and dialogue with the recipients of a given spiritual experience. If there are writings or messages, doctrinal clarification might be necessary. So this is basically saying that there are just some things that just need a little bit more investigation by the local bishop. Another conclusion to supernatural phenomena is called curator. And it says, while various or significant critical elements are noted, at the same time, the phenomena has already spread widely and there are verifiable spiritual fruits connected to it. In this situation, a ban that could upset the people of God is not recommended. Nevertheless, the diocesan bishop is asked not to encourage this phenomenon, but to seek out alternative expressions of devotion and possibly reorient its spiritual and pastoral aspects. So this is, again, a third form of trying to discern that, someone alleges that a saint or Mary appeared to this person, and this message is spread far and wide, and it's producing spiritual gifts. People are praying, they're going to Mass, they're going to confession, but there are just some strange things about it. It would not be wise for a bishop to say, nope, you can't do this. Instead, they might send a delegation out there to kind of give people some more information, to not discourage people from going, but also to try to reorient people back to the basics, and basically letting them know you don't need this supernatural phenomena in order to be a good Catholic. There is another declaration, and again, we just hit the third one. So the first is nihil obstat, the second is pre oculis abeator, and then the third is curator. The fourth is called sub mandato. So it's under a mandate. It says this: in this category, the critical issues are not connected to the phenomena itself, which is rich in positive elements, but to a person, a family, or a group of people who are misusing it. For instance, a spiritual experience may be exploited for particular and undue financial gain, committing immoral acts, or carrying out a pastoral activity apart from one already present in the ecclesiastical territory without accepting the instructions of the diocesan bishop. In this situation, the pastoral leadership of the specific place where the phenomenon is occurring is entrusted to the diocesan bishop, who, if unable to intervene directly, will try to reach out to a reasonable agreement. Again, this is kind of like a diplomatic approach to saying, look, we got to make sure that people are not using this for their own personal gain. We know that cult leaders have made a lot of money from supernatural phenomena, as well as be seen as such powerful spiritual people that they start doing immoral things, like saying, hey, I mean, I'll be very honest with you. I think Muhammad falls into this category for sure, because while he might be regarded as a great prophet, people who listened to him treated him as kind of like a demigod, and he did immoral things. You know, whether it be having multiple wives, and some of them were children, like literal, like toddler children, or basically saying, what I say you do, kill this group of people. So there's got to be a real kind of knowledge that there is always going to be someone overseeing the recipient of this supernatural phenomenon. The other conclusion might be prohibitur ut obstrautur. And that basically means, while there are legitimate requests and some positive elements, the critical issues and risks associated with this phenomenon appear to be very serious. Therefore, to prevent further confusion or even scandal that could erode the faith of ordinary people, the dicastery asks the diocesan bishop to declare publicly that adherence to this phenomenon is not allowed. So, basically means to prohibit and to obstruct anyone from thinking that this phenomenon is legitimate and real. And then the sixth is the declaration that there is nothing supernatural, declaratio de non supernaturalitate, which basically says, there ain't nothing supernatural here, don't go. That fifth one, the prohibitor et obstruator, is saying that there's some real dangers here, so we have to stop this from happening. And the sixth declaration says, there ain't anything happening here. So these are the six conclusions to this document. Let's jump right now into culture and how culture is interpreting supernatural phenomena. Culture is very confused because they are aware that supernatural things actually happen, but they don't realize that these might be two different things. So they're equating supernatural phenomena like unidentified aerial phenomena, and I'm going to give you an example of this as somehow it applies to what the documents of the Vatican are talking about. This is an example of that right now.
Vatican archives. In the 1920s, there's a Russian professor, his name is Gingrich Ludwig. He was able to have access to the archives. 12 centuries of European history. He walked up on this one section, which was ancient books about aliens, and he came across the craziest stuff. These books talked about how these star people coming down in crafts taught all the ancient civilizations how to build the pyramids, and taught the Mayans things, and like all this crazy stuff. And then, this is what I thought was the craziest part, but he writes down that these things had these weapons, and I guess they used it once on Babylon, and said that this weapon that these things possessed melted the walls of Babylon with the amount of energy and heat that they produce. And today we're like, those are nuclear weapons. And I'm just like, why are they hiding?
Yeah, I mean, when you put that kind of spin on things and you kind of put that kind of scary music behind it, I can understand why people are freaking out. That somehow the Vatican is covering up that aliens, who are very different from apparitions, which is why I'm talking about this now, there needs to be great distinction. Does the Vatican have information about supernatural phenomenon? Yes. That supernatural phenomenon has to be broken up in a couple different categories, because we know that there are probably other life forms other than humans. God has created many beings, many creations, types of existence, so to speak. And aliens are very different from the apparitions of saints, of Mary, of Jesus talking to people. These are divine spiritual experiences, phenomenon. These are supernatural, and people are equating it with like seeing an apparition. So for example, in New York, there was this.
Michelle Reyes was flying over New York City with her daughter, and she was sitting by a window. When she did what a lot of us do, we, take pictures out the window, nice video of the New York skyline. It's an amazing view. But what Michelle did not expect to see was a cylinder-shaped object zipping across her line of sight near LaGuardia Airport. Was it a bug inside the plane, maybe? Well, she played the video back to look, and no, it was not a bug. Whatever it was definitely outside the plane, and it was flying on its own, and it was really, really fast.
So you're going to get things like that. And then even more strange, you're going to get people who think that perhaps this might be all of these alien beings might be part of a conspiracy called Project Bluebeam. And Project Bluebeam might be a government plot to create an artificial second coming. And we're talking about Jesus coming back to earth. And all of this is to control people. And so the allegation is to kind of abolish all Christians and traditional religions and to replace everyone into a one world religion-based cult of a man, to abolish all national identities and national pride and establish a kind of one world religion because there's supernatural phenomena that reveals itself to us. Now, all of this sounds kind of crazy, doesn't it? Yes, that's why the Vatican needs to get involved, because if not, they begin to think that something like this is an apparition. So this looks like a person who is kind of bathed in light and just kind of hovering.
Jonathan, what the heck is that, dude?
So this is coming from Sequoia Park.
It almost looks like a person, right?
Coming from Sequoia Park in California. And so when you watch this video, all we see is just what looks like a person who's just floating in air, but clothed in light. Again, what are we to make of all of this? Well, I can tell you that culture is almost, I would say, in need, almost hungry for this kind of supernatural being. And that's why I want to jump right into now my comments, because culture is very confused about the supernatural world. And it's something that the Catholic Church has always known about. And that's why that new document came out. So now let's jump right into my commentary to help you who is watching this. You're watching this because you're actually probably a very spiritually and intellectual person who knows that this stuff is happening, but you don't want to follow suit of what culture is doing. They're freaking out. And the more you freak out, the more you can be controlled. And let's say for sure that the desire to control the minds of people, that ain't conspiracy. That's the reality of evil. Project Bluebeam might be considered a conspiracy theory, and they might use supernatural things, whether it be lights in the sky or alien-looking figures that are appearing that almost have a divine and godlike presence. If there's enough people who believe that stuff and that maybe government can help control and interpret why they are showing up this way, well, then we start listening to the government as the prophet. And this entity, which we have no idea what it is, or maybe we do, but somehow now that entity becomes our God, The government and its media becomes their mouthpiece, prophet, interpreters, and we become sheeple. That's a major, major problem. So let me jump into my commentary for how Catholics and other faithful Christians and critical thinkers, how are we supposed to approach all of this? First, let's make sure that we make some distinctions, that there is a difference between supernatural spiritual phenomena of divine beings. That's Jesus, Mary, saints, appearing to who is called a visionary or a seer, someone who sees things, hears things, either they call that a locution, or sees things, that's a visionary, or experience things in their own life. And we just call that kind of like a supernatural experience, like a stigmata, where you see the bleeding of the hands and on the head, the wounds of Jesus, versus someone who sees unidentified aerial phenomenon, UFOs, Bigfoot, a vision of some sort that is unexplainable. Those are two completely separate things. On this side, where we have this UFO aerial phenomenon stuff, I would say be very careful about that, because while it is interesting, it can lead to a freaking out, because strangely, there is no real message about it. You just see this UFO fly by. You see like these people, maybe someone flying through the sky. There's no message attached to it. So don't pay attention to it. If it piques your interest, great, but move on. This is the category that I'm more concerned about, when there are supernatural, divine-like messages or experiences or visions that talk about the holy ones, God himself, Jesus himself, Mary, or saints appearing to us. That's where the document from the Dicastery of the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, that's where we can be helpful. But for now, I got to be honest with you, some of this stuff is like gibberish when you get to all of these unique categories. So let me break it down in a more pastoral way for you. The first thing is to ask yourself, are these experiences, are they helping me to be a better person? Am I growing in holiness? Am I being filled with appropriate fear of God? And am I becoming more humble? So basically, you see all of these things happening. The question you ask is, so what? What's that going to do to me? And it kind of keeps you separate from all of these crazy things, and so you don't get super overwhelmed. The second thing that you want to do, pray that it goes away. So if something like this is happening to you, experiencing something supernatural, pray that it goes away. Like that person from Sequoia Park, California, when they see that, pray that it goes away. Just say, Lord, I ask you to take these things away from me. I don't need this in my life. I got people that I've got to focus on rather than some little light image, what looks like a person in the skies. So pray that it goes away. If it doesn't and it persists and it's getting in your face, like I would even say, you see something like that happening, pray that it goes away. If it doesn't, just look away. Don't pay attention to it. Move on. If it gets in front of your face and says, you got to look at me, like it would be so interesting if these UFOs that fly by actually stop and like a message appears on it, or someone pops out of a door and says, hey, focus on me. Pray that it not only goes away, but if it continues to happen, that's when you need to speak to a priest or a very trained counselor in the spiritual matters. That's what Margaret Mary Alacoque did. She was a saint who saw images of Jesus, and she prayed these things away. She eventually talked to her spiritual director. Spiritual director said, take holy water and bless that image. And she did, and it disappeared, and it turned out to be Satan deceiving this poor saintly woman. Because, look, we all want to be special. We all want to say, hey, I'd love to be the person who receives a heavenly message. And the actual visionaries will say to you, no, you're crazy. You don't want this. This is a major responsibility. So pray that it goes away. Talk to the right people. And I also want to recommend, don't tell anyone. One of the big problems about our modern world is that if you record something like a UFO of some sort, you immediately have the reaction to put it out on YouTube or on Instagram or on TikTok. And why? Because that'll make you famous for a few minutes or for a few days. Like the person who recorded that little unidentified aerial phenomena, they were on the news. And people are like, whoa, you're really special. The reason why we want to talk about this is because it's going to draw attention to us. Not a good sign. Another thing that we need to do is that if you experience the supernatural phenomena or even see it, test your own spiritual life and ask, am I becoming holier because of this? Am I praying more? Am I going to Mass? Am I experiencing the need to do penance? Where did I get this from? The kids of Fatima. There were 3 children. I mean, some of them weren't even teenagers. They were that young. They experienced images and visions and messages of the Blessed Mother. And what did they do? They tried not to tell anybody about it because they didn't want to be deemed as crazy. It was just a message for them. And then eventually, when they were told to talk about it, the reason why many people believe these 3 children is because they changed. They literally became more prayerful. In fact, Francisco, the younger one, would fast so severely that he would actually wrap a wire belt that with spikes in it around his waist to help curb his appetite, because he was given a special responsibility to fast and to do penance for the souls in purgatory and to lead people to God and to pray for the conversion of sinners. You know, did this video of seeing these crazy unidentified aerial phenomena, is it making you fast? Are you becoming holier? If not, then who cares? And then I think it's also important to make sure that the Catholic position is to get professional help, to actually speak to a psychologist or a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist and make sure that you're not delusional. If you check yourself in, that's actually a good sign that you're healthy. Like, honestly, there are times when I have to always say to myself, hey, you know what? I think I need to talk to somebody about this because this is just kind of occupying my mind. So I'll be in touch with my spiritual director, and from there, he can help me to discern if I need to talk to someone more professionally. And thankfully, we as Catholics don't see that as a stigma against you, but really a blessing because you're knowing yourself. And then the final thing, if all of this happens, you're going to have to submit to some sort of authority, because you don't become that authority. You don't become the visionary as well as the judge, because we can be deluded. And so we have to ask ourselves, if I experience something like this and it changes my life for the better, good, move on. No one needs to know about it. Who cares? But if you are told by this vision, you need to tell someone, like a church authority. And I'm looking at St. Juan Diego, who was the recipient of the vision and the messages of Guadalupe, Our Lady of Guadalupe. He was asked to go to the bishop, and he had to tell the bishop about this strange phenomenon that he had experienced. And the bishop asked for a sign. And the Virgin Mary, Our Lady of Guadalupe, she actually gave him that tilma from which all of those Castilian roses fell, and the image imprinted on the tilma. That was enough to convince that local bishop and the entire Catholic world. And so if that's the case, we always have to submit to an authority. And in this case, the authority is the Catholic Church. And this new document isn't for what social media or culture interpreting as like a time of a second coming, because that means we're rejecting what Jesus said about the second coming. We don't know when it's happening, but we know that it is coming. We don't need an alien life form to tell us that we're going to die and meet our maker. We already know that. But this really speaks to the culture that is godless. The culture is becoming so godless that we look to all these supernatural signs. Thankfully, the Catholic Church has a procedure. There's no need to freak out about it. This is not a conspiracy. The church has always believed these things are real and that they're unexplained phenomenon. Let's deal with it in a systematic way. That's all it is. Hopefully this was helpful to you. Hopefully you enjoyed this and this was informative and formational to your mind, because there's a lot of things that can really distract us from the truth. And the truth is, there is a God. There are supernatural beings. We are called to heaven. Before we get there, we will die. In the meantime, be not afraid. That's it. Listen, make sure you like, subscribe, share, and comment on this video. Let me know what you think about the supernatural world. And please consider supporting us on our Patreon community. We certainly need your help in order to grow our abilities to respond to all of your comments and questions, and more importantly, to continue to provide for you information that will truly feed you body, mind, and soul, and that we can continue to dish out commentary about church and culture. In the meantime, God bless you and stay hungry for God.